It's a real pleasure for me to have Thomas Ferguson here at this conference. He's an old friend uh, of mine, of course, but also of the Mexican Logic Group. He's also a regular visitor, and we are always happy to have you here, Thomas. Enjoy the talk. Sure.
Thanks. Thanks for letting me come and talk, even though I guess I'm a co-organizer, so. But thanks, Luis. Thanks for letting me co-organize. And thanks, Yasa, because, well, okay. Cool, all right. And thank you all for being here at favorite place in the world. Okay, I am going to talk about what I think is a really interesting concept that comes out of cryptography, but of the notion of zero-knowledge proof. But I am interested in treating it as like an authentically epistemic concept, and I'm interested in looking at what its logic is going to look like. So, well, it's a family of epistemic logics of zero-knowledge proof. Is anybody? Oh, Jacek, I thanked you for. You weren't here, but I said thank you for allowing us to co-organize this and everything, and putting it under your auspices of Studio Logica, so thanks. Anybody familiar with zero-knowledge proof? Okay. Well, all right, I think it's pretty cool and weird. So this is joint work with two PhD students of mine at RPI, Iki Gertler and Jutta Kalajakova. Iki, before I poached them, they were a PhD student in computer science, and then I was like, usually I'd say, what could, like, between doing a PhD in computer science or in cognitive science, like, computer science is the way to go, but it's not so obvious over the last, 2 years that is, in fact, the way to go, so I don't feel so guilty. But before they came and did their PhD, or were doing their PhD in computer science, they did adversarial cryptography for Google for 7 years. And so a lot of knowledge about this kind of stuff, and started discussing this, and that's how we...
Now I remember what zero-knowledge.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to give you some illustrations of it, so we'll all hopefully be a little bit acquainted with it. But I think it's pretty cool, and I think it's kind of cool as a logical concept as well. So, all right, what we're going to talk about, we're going to have to deal, because of the particularities of zero-knowledge, with things that are non-normal, and I think most of us aren't quite as familiar with the systems below K, for example. So we're going to give a brief review about that. I'm going to talk about zero-knowledge, and I'm going to talk about a formalism of some of the critical features of zero-knowledge proofs that I think are kind of brought out by a particular axiom. I'm going to call the zero-knowledge axiom. And then I'm going to talk about kind of a hierarchy of logics that make up this kind of family. And then I want to talk about the next step, which is making the boxes explicit so that we can actually populate boxes in the modal logic with honest transcripts that witness zero-knowledge protocols. Which is not yet quite completed, but I want to sketch out how we're going to get there. Okay. Oh, also, by the way, I'm sorry. I should say, I invite everybody to interrupt me at any point if you have a comment or a question. It's more fun when it's a discussion. So, okay, non-normal logic E is the kind of basic logic that we're going to be dealing with. It's based on classical logic base, so we have all the axioms of classical propositional logic. We have two rules. We've got modus ponens, and we've got substitution. And then we have this one rule of RE, that if I can prove the equivalence between phi and psi, then I can prove the equivalence between their boxed versions. So this is obviously very, very weak in terms of what you get out of the modality. So this is kind of the basic regular modal logic. Of course, zero-knowledge proof, as we're going to talk about, is something that involves multiple agents. So in order to characterize anything about it, we're going to need to move into a multimodal environment where we've got boxes for a number of players. And so we can define multimodal EN as the same thing, except for every I less than n, we've got a box that represents the modality for that agent. So pretty straightforward. This is discussed in Chalice. Oh yeah, look at that. This system appears in Chalice. I'm not aware of anybody who's considered multimodal and non-normal logics outside of this book. So one of the things that I was mentioning in the ride over is folks that are more acquainted with modal logic. I have this concern that a lot of things I'm going to talk about are totally sitting there, fully developed in some kind of 1942 paper, right? So if you are aware of that, like, let me know. I will be hurt, I will lick my wounds, and I will move on. Okay, so to give semantics for this, in order to give like non-normal semantics, we work with general frames. So we have a familiar set of worlds. For each of our boxes, we've got a function that is going to take elements of prop to prop, where prop is a set that's closed under complementation, intersection, union, and these functions. So these are general frames because we're not just taking the power set of worlds as our propositions, but rather we're selecting a particular algebraically well-behaved subset of the power set. Right, so how do we give a model? Well, we pop onto a general frame, valuation function that maps atoms to, that should be prop. It maps atoms to elements of prop, which are subsets of W. Okay, all right, so how do we start defining truth? Well, the truth set for an atom is going to be what your valuation function tells you it is: negation, complementation, conjunction, disjunction, intersection, and union, which is why we require prop to be closed under these set theoretic operations. Interpretation of arrow is like a material conditional. And then we define the truth set for a boxed formula to be whatever that box function maps the truth set of phi to, right? So you can see why those closure conditions on prop are important. And we can give also another kind of semantics where we talk about truth at a world. Everything you'd expect is there. In the case of box, W makes true phi sub I, box sub I phi, if W is in wherever box is mapped, the set of worlds at which phi is true. Okay, so it's easy to confirm that these two things are equivalent. And we can define validity in multiplayer E as preservation of truth for all your premises, from all your premises to your conclusion at any given point in any given model. Very familiar.
Did you define the box of phi before?
Do I have a laser? So it comes into the general frame.
Okay, so it's not a definition based on a relation.
No. It's yeah. So you put it so long as box could be empty. I mean, like it could map it could map everything to actually some of the counterexamples that we use. It's degenerate. It just maps everything to like the empty set, for example. So it could be really anything, but you get the box in the general frame, and then assume that prop has to be closed under it. Oh, did I? Okay. Doesn't work anymore. No magic for me. Okay, but I, good? Answered it? All right, cool. Okay, and soundness and completeness for En is pretty easy to prove just by generalizing the standard canonical model proof. Okay, so we can, of course, give extensions to these. You're going to make it work because you've got the magic. We can give standard extensions to these. Important extensions to E involve adding 4 to it, or T. These two axioms, M and C, or our familiar K, we can add those, and we can form extensions of E. And obviously then, like for our multiplayer E's, we can do that as well. So like a nice little roadmap to like the systems that we're kind of interested in is we've got E, we can build it up to EK, we can add 4, and we can have EK T4. I'm sorry, also it's become a little joke because the cryptographer student name is Iki, and like Iki, like you already had a logic named after you, and it was already in the literature. Oh, wow. Nice, thank you. Okay, and of course we can do the same kind of trick when we have multiplayer E by just adding these for given boxes. Yeah, so we can say T, like player I has T or something like this, and we can do the same kind of stuff. Now, for the model theory, of course, we can give correspondences between the axioms holding and particular properties that hold of the frames themselves and how the boxes operate. So, for example, like T for box sub I is that whatever X is in prop, box sub I maps X to a subset of X. Right? These are pretty natural things. You can kind of see this is very 4-ish, that's very T-ish. These are also, again, could be shown to hold for the multi-agent extensions. Okay. Nah, it's cool though, because I needed a little exercise. All right, so that is our modal logic background. Nothing new there, really. Okay, now, zero knowledge, and you'll have to forgive me if I stumble through this because, again, I'm not a cryptographer. But in cryptography, a zero knowledge proof is a protocol in which one party, the prover, can convince another party, the verifier, that some given statement is true without conveying to the verifier any information beyond the mere fact of that statement's truth. So I'm going to give you two examples of this, but important things to note about this is that it's a probabilistic proof, but it's a probabilistic proof that the prover can convince me, the verifier, up to any epsilon. So I can say I want to be convinced with 99.99999% certainty, and the prover can reliably show me with that degree of probability that this thing is true. So it doesn't ever get it to probability 1, but for any arbitrary degree of uncertainty I'm willing to take, the verifier can always provide me with a witness that this is true up to any fine degree of uncertainty I'm willing to allow. So there's something really interesting about that I don't know how quite to deal with. It's probabilistic, but if the prover is willing to give me up to any threshold of credence that I'm willing to allow, it starts looking very knowledge-like, and it starts seeming less probabilistic. Okay, so two illustrations of zero knowledge. So this is from a paper which is something, it's a really cheeky title. It's something like How to Teach Your Kids About Zero Knowledge Proofs for Fun and Profit or something. It's like a really great title. But the example is given of this Aladdin's cave, which I'm gonna butcher a little bit. And I'm not going into all the intricacies, but hopefully this will give a little bit of understanding about how a zero knowledge protocol works. So suppose that there's a cave and it has a fork that go into two passages that I can't view from over here. And there appears to be a wall separating the two things, right? So somebody could go to the left fork, somebody could go to the right fork. For all purposes of examination, there is a wall that divides these two things. All right, so imagine that somebody tells me that they have a magic word that allows them to make the wall disappear and pass through it. So the proposition here is there is a secret passage that connects the left and right corridors. So that is my statement, okay? So suppose that here I am, I'm the verifier, I want to verify it, and I have a prover that says that I can demonstrate to you that there is a secret passage without you actually seeing the secret passage, without me leaking the secret password, any of these things. They're going to show me that there is, in fact, a secret passage. All right, is the story moderately clear? Okay, cool. All right, so here's prover, right? How could prover do this without my actually witnessing this wall disappearing or having any more information betrayed to me? Well, what prover could do is prover could say, all right, I'm going to go in to the cave, and what I need you to do is I need you, oh, wait, sorry. I don't want to butcher it. I'm going to go into the cave, and I want you to come out here to where the fork is, and I want you to call out either left or right. And if you call out left, I'm going to come out of the left passage. And if you call out right, I'm going to come from the right fork. Upgrade. All right. So what Prover's going to do is I'm going to send Prover into the cave. Prover's going to ask me to shout out left or right, and Prover needs to come out on either the left or the right side, right? So, for example, right, I could say, I want you to come out the right, and Prover's going to walk out there from the right. I could say, I want you to come out the left, and Prover's going to come out on the left, all right? So suppose that we have one round of this game, right, where I'm standing there, and I go in, Prover's going to demonstrate there's a secret passage, right? Send verifier in, I walk over here, I say left, and verifier comes out. Has verifier demonstrated that there was a secret passage there? No. Maybe there's a secret passage, but maybe Prover just got lucky, right? Okay, so then it happens again. One more, okay, I'm not convinced yet. Give me another round. Okay, and I go and I say right, and then Prover comes out on the right. Am I convinced he could have been, he could have just chosen the right passage and come back out and he could have been lucky, right? Again. But there is some threshold at which you start suspecting, wait, every time I call left, because the idea is like, if he goes into the left and I call left, like maybe he got lucky and he was over there, but maybe he had gone over to the right and he actually passed through the wall, right? So the idea that's going on here is that at one step, there's like a 50-50 chance it's true. Another step, well, okay, there's like a little bit more credence. The third step, okay, maybe something's going on. But if he's willing to play this game with me as many times as I'm willing to challenge him, at some point I start thinking, yeah, no, really, he has a trick. So that no matter what corridor he's gone down, wherever I call, he's either already there or he can pass through the wall. At some point, I start believing him, right? So that is essential. That interaction, that set of games that we have played, is essentially a transcript of interactions that serves as a witness that there is, in fact, some method of going through this wall. Okay. Make sense? Okay, cool. All right, I'm sorry if I butchered a little bit. Another very common illustration of this. All right, so one thing that's important to note right here is if I was a third party, and in the paper they give the example of like a reporter or something, but like if I'm a third party here and I talk to verifier, is there anything that verifier can do to convince me that this set of interactions was enough to establish that there is a secret passage? Like, if Luis and I go up to you and I say, hey, look, Luis has got a secret passage. And I'm not going to show you the passage. But look, what happened is that like I went and I called out left and then Luis was there. And then I called out right and Luis was there. And then I called right again and he was there. And I got tricky and I was like, I'm doing right a third time. And oh my, he was there. So like, look, there totally must be a secret passage. Would anybody here be convinced by this? Collusion.
Yeah, but the person doesn't know it.
No, but like it's not, it's the fact that Luis keeps on coming out is convincing to me.
Yeah.
But the fact that I have related this transcript to you, it's not portable in some sense. Because you can't, maybe Luis and I woke up and we talked and we were like, we're gonna screw with Axel today, right? We got the story about a secret passage, right? It's not portable. There's nothing that we can do collectively to go and convince somebody else about this. So the zero knowledge proof that I've gained by interacting with Prover here, I can't go and take that transcript to anybody else and show them, hey, by the way, you should trust us this is true because you can't rule out the fact that there's collusion going on. So that's a very important property about this that the Aladdin's Cave example kind of brings up. Another example that illustrates another component about zero knowledge proofs. So it's a common one that's used to illustrate this is Sudoku. So this really illustrates the fact that no information can be revealed in a zero knowledge proof, besides the fact that like in a case like a puzzle, there's a solution. Okay, so suppose that I've got a Sudoku sitting here, and I want to convince you that I have the solution to the Sudoku, but I don't want to reveal the information in the Sudoku, right? I want to prove to you that I actually, so for example, we could be competing on the Sudoku. You and me, we could be trying to do it for time, and I would want to, I would want to show you that I got there first, but I don't want to give you any information because I don't want you to rip off my brilliant solution in the Sudoku. So this is something that we can do with zero knowledge. So we've got a Sudoku. We could take all the numbers in the illustration of this. It's tiles. We could solve the puzzle. We could flip all of the items over. And me, as the prover, I could go and verify to you that all of the important numbers were correct. So I'm not revealing any new information. Okay, but now let's suppose what I'm going to do is I've got the thing filled out. I'm going to spin the board around a bunch of times, and then I'm going to allow you, the verifier, to pick any row, any column, or any square. And what I'm going to do is I could take off all the numbers from that row, and I could show you that they're 1 through 9, the digits 1 through 9. All right, so again, the first time we play this game. So for one, they're shuffled. So presume that I've spun it around or something. They're shuffled, so I haven't revealed any clues about the actual solution to the problem. But I verified that at your random choice, I was able to satisfy the fact that I did that row correctly. Does this establish that I beat the Sudoku? No, but it suggests that I may have, right? And if we do this an arbitrary number of times, at some point, you would probably be convinced that I did, in fact, do it. And in fact, again, the weird dimension that I don't know quite what to make of, the fact that I, as the prover, am willing to undertake that risk is also very important in this case, right? But if I'm trying to cheat you, the risk approaches one that I'm going to get caught. Right. So the important thing about here is one, again, I can show you probabilistically, but something becomes important when I, as a service, am willing to do this an arbitrary number of times and undertake an arbitrary amount of risk that I could get caught if I were cheating. The other thing is that I have imparted to you, the verifier, no additional information beyond the fact that I have proven the Sudoku. So those are two really important components of it. So if we look at zero knowledge, and let me look at time time is just passing by, sorry. Okay, I think it's interesting to think of this as an actual, honest epistemic notion. It's got some really interesting properties that distinguish it from things like knowledge simpliciter. So this non-portability. What happens if I have a proof, I don't know, a Hilbert-style proof of something, and I give you the proof? Have you been satisfied that it's proven once I've delivered the proof to you? And can you take that proof and deliver it to somebody else? And they can deliver it. It's very portable. Proof is very portable. Zero knowledge proof is not portable in any way. Yeah. If we think of portability as the ability of an agent to transfer that artifact to another agent and preserve epistemic warrant, think about it as portable, and the Latins cave example shows that there's nothing portable about this. Same thing with the Sudoku. If you wanted to go and tell your friend, hey, Thomas totally nailed the Sudoku, and they say, how do you know? And well, because he kept on showing me a row randomly, and it kept on getting it right. So obviously, it's not portable in that case either. Yeah?
But then, practically every epistemic justification is going to be non-portable, right? So what is exceptional is proof. Most a justification, almost any reason why I believe something is probably something I won't be able to port up and have.
Yes. No. I guess the reason this becomes salient to me is because we're talking about these things as proofs in some sense. Yeah, so portability, but you do get something, you do get this artifact. And I guess there's just something, even just with respect to warrant or justification. Justification slips away as it's passed through the supply chain, right? But it doesn't just immediately diminish either. And there's something kind of interesting about zero knowledge proof, that it is absolutely useless on the next go-around.
Okay, good.
Right? So there's still something, even in that broader space, that still kind of distinguishes it, that it immediately collapses. So, yeah, I grant that point.
No,
yeah, no, I think it's, no, thank you for making that point. It was very good.
One more thing.
Yes.
You want to talk about this at the end?
No, I invited you,
Okay,
please.
okay. So my puzzle was like one slide ago, but it's like, what if at some point verifying your statement becomes too computationally complex task? You know, like, because conjectures in mathematics is like, okay, I tried with many prime numbers, and I can show you that. I can show you a lot of twin prime numbers, but you see what I'm getting.
Okay, but even in this case, like, all right, so there's two things about the computational complexity. So one thing is something I'm gonna, like, I'll make abstracting, and just Iki and I have had like just all out arguments. Like, but no, because they're coming at it like a cryptographer, and they're like, no, we have to talk about P. And I'm like, well, I want to do it like a propositional logic, and like we can't even talk about that. So I am completely suppressing some important computational elements of this because I think it's still interesting. But I think it's interesting because I think the story can still be told about twin primes, right? If I were willing, again, we have to allow some abstraction here. If I say I've got an algorithm or something that like always does like proves twin primes conjecture up to any n or something like this, and I'm willing until the heat death of the universe to show you this up to any n, like there's some point you're like, well, maybe Thomas has got something here, right? Like maybe there's an algorithm that is using or something. But
That's the opposite of what we consider proof in mathematics.
Yes,
Not
no.
the opposite, but the competitor of what we in numbers.
No,
call proof in mathematics. No?
Yeah, it is. It's not a proof, but it's something proofy. There's something very weird going on there. But I guess the nice thing about the point you made about more complicated mathematical problems is that I think the idea of a prover being willing to undergo any arbitrary amount of risk of getting caught, you can take that and apply it into domains beyond just P, into things that are more complicated as well. But yeah, no, I don't suggest that. And well, actually, and here we go. Here is the other thing. Yeah. So factivity is an issue. Yeah.
But if you bet on something that is unverifiable for computational problems, it's too easy for you to bet. When you see what I'm saying? That might be the.
No, there's stuff going on there, and we're actively thinking about it. But again, the like wanting to think about this as a very abstract concept versus like how do we get the kind of interesting properties out of it is, yeah. No, I appreciate this feedback, and it's important, and I promise that it is being considered. Yeah. This is one other thing that goes into it, is that you do have a failure of factivity, right? I could just be, if we play the Sudoku game and I'm trying to demonstrate that I know the proof, under some basic assumptions of rationality, like my risk of getting, if I'm cheating you, my risk approaches 1, that I'm gonna get caught. There's really no reward that I could expect that would be so worthwhile that I would admit an arbitrary amount of like risk at probability 1 that I'm gonna get caught, right? So there's something like secure about this, but it's still not factive because you can't assume that I'm rational. I could be irrational and just exceedingly lucky. I could just be like blessed so that we played the Sudoku game and, you know, December 2072 rolls around and we're still doing it and I'm still getting it right, but I'm just so damn lucky, right? So that's something that I can't rule out. So the factivity of this fails despite the fact that it does seem to establish epistemic warrant. We don't get it. And in fact, the portability failure is, I think, very linked to the failure of activity as well, right? What's interesting, though, again, when we think about this as a propositional logic, is that we can actually consistently add factivity back in, but there's just a very high cost, which I'll show what it is. It leads to some degree of trivialization. But yeah, so the failure of activity is very related to the failure of portability, but you could still have effective zero-knowledge proof. It's just things get really kind of uninteresting at that point. Okay, also not as related to what we're doing in the first movement, but there's also a failure of constructivity because I don't actually have to show you. I can have an existential, there exists a solution to the Sudoku without having to furnish a witness, right? What's interesting to me about this is that when we start thinking about making these things explicit, and we start actually not just taking boxes as like semantic objects, but populating them with transcripts, the constructivity thing is, I think, going to become kind of important. Okay, so zero knowledge, it's distinct from knowledge, simpliciter. It seems also distinct from a number of other epistemic concepts. It does seem like a nice point to investigate. For example, there's really, I think, interesting things about how knowledge and zero knowledge interact that we're not going to cover today, but I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can ask that are downstream of this, like how zero knowledge establishes belief, it doesn't establish knowledge. Like, there's interesting things that go on there. Okay, so we can start re-examining those features in more of a propositional logic setting, and I think start arriving at a zero-knowledge axiom. Okay, again, we're thinking about we have some finite number of players, and we each one has a box that's distinct that says I have a zero-knowledge proof. So box sub I is going to say agent I has a zero-knowledge proof of whatever follows. Box sub J, agent J has, box sub I is read as agent I has a zero-knowledge proof witnessing that B. Okay, so let's let mu be the sentence, the wall of the cave is magical. Okay, how can we start thinking about non-portability in this case? In the situation in which agent I is a verifier, in the Aladdin's cave case, we have the truth of box I mu. Agent I has a zero-knowledge proof that there exists a magical password that gets you through the wall of the cave. In virtue of the non-portability, and again, this sort of absolute non-portability, it immediately collapses if I try to pass it on. For any j distinct from I, on the basis of i's having a authentically zero-knowledge proof that mu, we should be able to infer that it is not the case that agent j has a zero-knowledge proof that I has a zero-knowledge proof that mu. So for any other agent j distinct from I, we should expect that j lacks the zero-knowledge proof of i's zero-knowledge proof of mu. So this is, I think, a relatively good formalization of this failure of portability. And this leads us to formalize it as a zero-knowledge axiom, that box I phi implies not box j, box I phi, whenever I and j are distinct. Please.
Isn't it too strong, this? It seems that if I has the zero-knowledge proof, that not necessarily j has that, but it might have for some other reason, or it might not in this setting.
Yeah, we've talked about whether this is too strong. I don't think that it is for a number of reasons. Because what would a zero-knowledge proof of a zero-knowledge proof look like? It would be like, here's a transcript that worked for them. Here's another transcript that worked for them. And there's nothing that adheres in that transcript that allows you to extract information.
Wouldn't that say simply that the negation of two boxes nested is always true? For
No.
I and j different?
This is the factivity issue. This is, I mentioned, you can consistently add factivity. It's non-normal.
So you don't want that. That would be too strong.
Yeah, that would be too strong.
Okay.
And I understand, and I want to hear you say it. I want to say one thing really quick, which is, we've had I'm just being open and honest with everybody here. We have had some concern that we're doing a little equivocation here. That it's not that, what you can infer is not that from I's zero-knowledge proof of phi, it's not the case that J lacks a zero-knowledge proof that I has a zero knowledge proof of phi. It's rather that J doesn't know, that that's a different operator. But I feel pretty confident when we've gone through what could the zero knowledge proofs of zero knowledge proof look like, that it really does work. Yeah, but thank you. Very, very good questions. I appreciate it. Kat, do you have something?
Yeah. So I was worried about that too, but it occurs to me, this is maybe something to talk about more elsewhere, but I just want to pin it to the board as it were, that you might be able to use something like a strong epistemic modal, like must, as formalized by someone like Kratzer, who's using like an ordering over possible worlds to handle this problem, because then you're going to get in a local highly probable set that must is going to hold. It's just going to be a little more complicated on the semantic side.
I will bear this in mind. There's a lot of formalisms that I think we can dig into, and I'm interested to try and think about this. Somebody had mentioned Gödel modal logic the other day. But these are inherently have these degrees. We could think about a Gödel modal logic, and what's going on is that you have some operator that takes you to the worlds that are arbitrarily highly accessible or something like this. So there are a lot of different ways to play with this, but it seems to work out pretty well. We've got, well, I'll show you. We've got consistency and soundness and completeness. So there's a lot of directions we can take this. But yeah, I'd really like to get a reference on this if you're willing to give it up. But thank you. Thank you both. Okay. But what this means, hopefully that's clear. I's zero knowledge of proof does not transfer. J never can have a zero knowledge proof of I's zero knowledge proof of phi. Okay. So, in choosing an adequate logic of zero knowledge proof, we then have to assess what axioms are appropriate to the use case. Again, in concert with Iki, we've figured that these seem very, very reasonable. If I have a zero knowledge proof of an implication, then I can kind of internalize and draw from my zero knowledge proof of phi that psi is going to have that zero knowledge proof as well. So there's some kind of internal mechanism I can use conceptually if you give me a zero knowledge proof of a conditional or a disjunction. And also, there's reasons I think that 4 is a good one to have, that agent I's zero knowledge proof of phi, they can review the transcripts and satisfy themselves that they did in fact have a zero knowledge proof. So there is some internalization that goes on there as well. If I have transcripts from an interaction with phi that the wall was in fact magical, I can go back and reflect on that because I can trust myself. I can't collude with myself in some sense, right? So 4 seems like an appropriate axiom to add. So we're going to take as the basic logic of zero knowledge proof for n many players to take EK4 sub n in concert with the zero knowledge axiom. Holy cow, we're going through time. Okay, I'm going to show you some stuff, but we're not going to go through proofs, obviously. But we have, therefore, a nice semantics. A lot of this stuff is just inherited from abstracting a little bit from the standard results in non-normal modal logics on general frames, but we can give a nice semantic condition for the zero knowledge axiom as well, that how any two boxes, box I and box J, in relate is that they have to have this property, that they can't sort of cross when it comes to box I of X and box J of box I and X. So whenever I and J are distinct, these two elements of prop have to be disjoint. Okay, I'm not gonna put the model down, but we can very easily show with a very simple model that has 3 points and 2 to 3 many propositions that that you can have a model in which everything in ZK4n is consistent, that it's all true, but it doesn't prove everything. So there's a description of the model. Eventually, there'll be a paper and you can look at the proof there. And we can prove soundness and completeness. Very standard kind of way to go about this with defining prop and your valuation function in a very standard way. And it turns out that this semantic condition that we have right here just falls out in the canonical model, and we have soundness and completeness that follows from that. I'm not gonna beat you up over it, don't worry. It's a model, it's a model, it's a model, it's a model. Corollary, it's an actual honest-to-God model of the logic. Okay, sorry. I gave some of these slides for a different audience, and I also thought I had more time. So, okay, here we go. I don't want to sound as completeness. It all works out!
So just one quick, very quick. Are you looking at you're looking at the local consequence, right? In terms of
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I only. Yeah, I don't know what to do with global consequence. I know there's a lot of people that I really, really respect for whom it's super important. Now, looking at local, yeah. Okay. All right, so we can give extensions of this, and this is, I think, where some things also get a little bit interesting. So we had factivity, and we mentioned that we kind of wanted to keep it out because it seems, again, like the whole notion of zero knowledge relies on the fact that you can't ever completely rule out the opportunity for deception. So T seemed like it would be really bad, and I think it's really surprising that T is still consistent with it. There's also this axiom C4, which again is like a limited form of factivity that if I can convince myself that I had a zero knowledge, if I have a zero knowledge proof of a zero knowledge proof, I can sort of collapse those things to just say that constitutes a zero knowledge proof. So it's the other direction of 4, but only localized to the I and J being identical. So this is nice. And then, what does N and K stand for? No knowledge or something, which is, no nested knowledge. This is another interesting axiom right here, which just says that it doesn't matter what phi is, and it doesn't matter who J and I are. Like, J doesn't have any zero knowledge proof that I is zero knowledge proof of phi. Right? So, like, no nested knowledge, which is...
But this is not the basic, this is something...
No, we don't, we don't want to endorse this, but it's interesting to look, because these things seem like, well, C4 actually seems reasonable to me. T, we did not want at all, and N and K just seems like you've trivialized the whole project. So what is interesting, I think, well, of course, we can give semantic conditions, and we can, for each of these things, right? C4 is true when box is idempotent. N and K, I don't know what to call it, but we can just, if J has taken X to some set, I has to take it to the empty set. It's a very, I said there's some degree of trivialization, and this is just that, right? Okay, so we have a number of results of independence of these things. What's more interesting is the fact that they're consistent. Okay, so here's one of the things that I think is really interesting about these things, not as zero knowledge, but just as logics. And this is also the reason why I just think somebody at some point is going to be like, oh yeah, somebody's totally done all this, is that you have to build on a non-normal base where we lack this rule of necessitation, that all theorems you can infer box sub I of that theorem, right? So the logics that we're most used to working with have necessitation as a rule. But we're also familiar with there being non-normal logics. A lot of people like Thomas Tudor and Feroldi and Tudor, like a lot of folks have been saying that non-normal modal logics are really good for hyperintentional purposes. So I think there's a little bit of a resurgence in interest in them. Whereas, I mean, until recently, I think they were always kind of viewed as this curiosity. And even when you look at like Kripke's investigation into non-normal logics, it's almost like, well, we just had to talk about S2 because just for sake of completeness, but nobody really cares about S2, right? But I think there's a little bit of a change in how we're relating to it. But what is interesting is that these things are contra-normal, right? If you take Humberstone's notion of contra-classicality, right, and we could think of something as contra-normal if there are no consistent normal extensions, right? So the thing about S2 is, okay, well, I could still add necessitation to S2. I could do this for S3. I could do this for S1. Like, I could do it for E. Like, the standard non-normal modal logics you see are always still sublogics of triv, right? The logics that we've just talked about, in virtue of having that zero knowledge axiom, cannot be given any normal extensions at all. So they're contra-normal. We can observe that this works if I have zka in my logic. It's very simple to show that it has to be contra-normal. If I have a theorem tau, by necessitation, box sub I tau is going to be true. It's going to be provable by provability of box sub I tau. I'm going to be able to apply necessitation again and get box sub j box sub I tau. But by modus ponens and the zero knowledge axiom, I had box sub I tau, so I can get not box sub j box sub I tau, and now I've got an inconsistency, and now I've exploded. Yeah?
But that means that there are like natural ways of restricting necessitation so that you get consistent extensions, right? Like just restricting it to non-model language, or just keeping track that there is always one I that is, so for every t there is so you can, like, yeah, like for every phi,
Yep.
you can only necessitate it for the indices that occur in phi.
I-
Those two extensions would be consistent.
I think that is totally true. I mean, this touches on something that, like, I won't have time, because we're dragging on, sorry. It's just me, just blah, blah, blah. It does touch on something that I've been very concerned about if we make these things explicit. That the standard method of making things explicit is to have this sort of constant specification where for every axiom, you have these proof objects that witness it.
Good.
And you have to be very, very, that's necessitation.
You're right. Yeah.
You can also restrict it in these settings to some just smaller constant specification. And one thing that isn't clear to us is whether, like, we know we need to make such a restriction, whether we can express the types of restriction that would work is still kind of open. We're not sure. But you're right, I could see this being consistent with some type of necessitation. It's still, like, so if it were just like box-free necessitation, okay, that might work. But it's still an interesting phenomenon. You can't have necessitation in its full majesty, right? I just can't find any modal logics that have this property. So I think it's interesting. Okay, boom, 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 boom. So what's also interesting, I think, is that we can generalize some of these principles to multiple players. There's, again, moving a little bit past zero knowledge, just looking at these things qua modal logics. We could think about generalizations of that, of like the failure of nested knowledge, so that when I've got a string where I don't have any alternations where the things are the same, so where I sub j is different from I sub j plus 1, like we could say nkn is this, it's not the case that box I sub 0 dot 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 I sub n phi, so like you can't have nested knowledge in this particular configuration when these things don't have redundancies, I guess. We could generalize T in an interesting way. So whenever, for any I0, when you have a zero knowledge proof of a string of zero knowledge proofs or nested zero knowledge proofs like this, then you can take that off. And you have a kind of complement to it, which is a generalization of the zero knowledge axiom, where if I have, from the standpoint of agent I sub 0, a zero knowledge proof of this formula, where that's set up correctly, then I can infer it's not the case that that matrix within the scope of this holds. So we got a kind of cool, so some of the things we've looked at, these are just generalizations of that. The case where n is 1 is just that no nested knowledge principle. Like, it's not the case that I sub 0, I sub n phi is true when I sub 0 and I sub n are different. That's n and k. T0 is just t. bar T sub 1 is our zero knowledge axiom. So if we look at these things, and I wish I could make this bigger, but we have this kind of nice hierarchy of logics that generalize this like no nested knowledge principle, the generalized T, the generalized zero knowledge. Oh, I'm sorry, of course, silly. This is zero knowledge, it's just the contrapose, right? That if I have a zero knowledge proof, I can prove phi, then it's not the case. Yeah, so these are zero knowledge axioms. These are like the failure of nested knowledge axioms, and these are like increasingly weak generalizations of T. And we have, it's kind of interesting, yeah, so here's zero knowledge, there's T. And what's interesting is that in each of these cases, the NK1 is equivalent to the conjunction of T and T bar, right? So this is the conjunction of these two principles, logically. This is the conjunction of these two principles. Another interesting thing is that these are all contranormal all the way down, have no consistent, no consistent normal extension. So there's like this really nice, interesting structure that comes out of it when we start thinking about this. Shoot, okay. So we can show that any extension of E sub n, including anything that you saw on your left, is contranormal. Just generalize the argument. Okay, I'm at time. And I guess, let me take 5 minutes to just sketch out where I think this needs to go. So the interesting thing about zero knowledge proof, if we're thinking about it in terms of epistemic logic, is that in practice, we have proof artifacts. We have transcripts of these interactions that are syntactic objects, right? In the same way, if you think about Gödel's provability interpretation of S4, it's not just this abstract, like, well, I've got a proof of phi. You also, luckily, when you have a proof of phi, you have an artifact that you can populate that box with. You have a syntactic object that you could use in order to populate the box. So one of the things that I think might be very, very promising here is to go the route of so-called justification logics in order to populate these non-normal logics with the actual transcripts. And if we can do that, that's the proof of concept. So concerns about is this the right framework, or is this axiom really like a felicitous representation of zero knowledge? All of those things I think are resolved if we can literally populate the logic with the transcripts from zero knowledge protocols. So this is kind of the next step. The cool thing about these justification logics is that you take the boxes and you put new proof terms in them. And then you can operate on the proof terms. And what that does essentially is it shows the kind of inner machinery of what's going on in, for example, S4 as a provability logic. I think they're very invaluable. I've been a big fan of these. I've done a bunch of work on like bilateral logics, where I suggest that this kind of technology allows you to see like how particular logics stand with respect to the interaction between proof and refutation. I think they're very valuable. It's a very valuable framework. So insofar as we can make concrete these boxes in virtue of transcripts, if we take like Archimedes' logic of proofs, we can take S4 and actually give you proofs for each of the boxes. We can witness it with Gensen-style proofs or Hilbert-style proofs. We can really extract the proof theoretic content that we have in S4. The hope is that we can do the same kind of thing here. So yeah, it's a double thing. There's two unique issues that make this kind of difficult in this standard setting. There's the fact that we've got non-normality, and there's the fact that we are dealing with multiple agents, neither of which are traditionally treated in this justification logic paradigm. I would totally go, but I'm not. I'll just suggest that there's some recent work that's cool that says that we can kind of suggest that we can do this.
I think since you allowed for questions, you can go.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. All right, let me explain the syntax. Who's seen these, like justification logics or logics of proof or anything like this? Okay. I tend to love them, but maybe it's just because like I kind of want Sergei. You know what's weird? Sergei Artemov. He looks like a beefy version of my dad. Beefy in the good way. It's like if my dad had been hitting the gym a lot, right? So anyway, I don't know how, I probably just revealed way too much about my inner psyche there, but nevertheless, I do love Artyomov. Okay, what do I mean? What is the additional syntactical texture that you get? Okay, so we start off by building proof terms. We can have some variables and we can have some constants. For the constant specification that I'm going to mention, what a proof constant is just a lookup to an axiom. So I have axioms, I can just pair it with a constant that says, hey, look over here, this is an axiom. From these terms, I can start building up more complicated terms that actually correspond to concatenation of proofs, application of proofs. So I've got a few different operators. I've got a sum, which Artyomov always describes as taking two knowledge artifacts and pushing them together like the first and the second volume of, I don't know, there's got to be a really good book that's in 2 volumes. Push them together, and you've got the sum total of information in them. You can have an application, so some proofs are functional, right? Where I take a functional proof S, and I apply it to a proof T, and I generate a new proof, S dot T. And there's also an operation of proof checker, so I can take a proof term, I can construct a new proof term, bang C, for example, that is the proof in which I go and review the proof of C, right? So I can check a proof as well. So I can construct more complicated proof terms from these. So Bacchus Nor, I got this. And then I've got a language where I've got all my connectors, but now instead of a box, I can populate that with a T that says T, whatever T represents, whatever proof object T denotes, that is a proof of phi. Okay, when we want to axiomatize these things, the content of these operators kind of becomes clear. So in the logic of proofs, we have application. If S is a proof of a conditional and T is a proof of the antecedent, then this concatenation operator, this application operation where I take S and I apply it to T, that generates a proof of the consequent. That's just modus ponens, right? I have a proof of the conditional, I've got a proof of the antecedent, I can apply that and get a proof of the consequent. Sum, if I have a proof S of phi, I can concatenate that in a sense with any additional proof and it remains a proof of phi. Proof checker, if I have a proof of phi, T is a proof of phi, I can go through a recursive operation of reading T and establishing that it is indeed a proof of phi, right? And reflection is just like this factivity thing that if I have a proof of phi, then phi is true. Okay. The constant specifications on here, I won't really want to belabor. But necessitation is sort of brought out by these constant specifications so that if I have an axiom, I can add in a number of I can add in a proof term for phi, which means that I can essentially it's like the lookup to the axiomatization that phi is in fact an axiom. And what a constant specification is then is a way that I can take every axiom and give it a constant. The maximal one is total constant specification, and that is clearly not compatible with anything that we would be doing. Okay. Oh, maybe just give a little bit of the flavor of what's going on, and you can literally provide interpretations of these proof constants with your favored proof theory. You can actually use these to point to actual proofs, and it sort of internalizes and everything makes a lot of sense. That sketch of it, does it make sense? I'm making the boxes explicit. I'm taking the sort of implicit proof theoretic content of the boxes, I'm making them explicit by actually giving proofs that witness them. Okay, so I mentioned a couple of issues. If we want to try and use this, but using zero-knowledge transcripts to populate boxes, we have issues with non-normality, we have issues of multi-agent stuff. Just like 3 months ago, Ronnie and Studer have this paper where they provide a justification logic or an explicit version of E and EM. So they point to for all the EM Protopescu on this in terms of wanting to do like hyperintensional deontic stuff, but they are able to introduce explicit versions of the non-normal E and EM, JE and JEM, that allows us to do all of this stuff by introducing this weird operation that gives us new justification terms. Okay, I'm not going to go through the axiomatization because I'm a little over time, but what's interesting here is that there's a proof of concept that a sublogic, a non-normal sublogic of what we're doing, can be given the same treatment, and now the question is just like, can we push that, can we add some more structure so that we can get like the zero knowledge logic covered as well? Okay. Any case, the other issue is multi-agent stuff. And Yavorskaya, Tatiana Yavorskaya, 10 years ago, introduced a really nice extension of these logics of proof to have multiple players. So each agent, in this case 0 and 1, for example, she's talking about two-player, has their own, for example, proof calculus. And we want to keep track of the proof objects that they use in order to populate boxes. And what's interesting in this case, oh, sorry. Yeah, so LP2 is not the full interaction, but this is just like each agent has their own logic of proofs, and there's no interaction that comes out of this. Yeah, no, but the interesting thing is we can start codifying with new operators on proof terms. What does it mean for agent 0 to verify for agent 1 to verify a proof of 0? Well, whenever 0 has a proof of phi, agent 1 can transform that proof artifact T into a proof artifact that's usable for 1, right, to establish it. Or we can think like Yavorskaya introduces conversion, where we don't have to just interpret, but we can directly take 0's proof, and 1 can just turn it into a proof object that's suitable for them that witnesses that phi, right? So you can add these things, you can generalize these things to, you could have like 4 players, you could have 2-4 verification and so forth, right? And Yavorskaya has this full conversion logic where essentially 0 and 1 can just use each other's proof theoretic apparatus they always have this recursive method of turning out their competitors' proofs into proofs that you can use. So the technology, again, is there for multi-agent stuff. So now what our step is right here is to try to harmonize these things so that we can get explicit versions of ZK4N, something like JZK4N, right? So they, like, for example, things that now we're worrying about is they stop at EM. Are there particular challenges with adding C or 4? Is that zero knowledge axiom, is that going to be a problem? We don't know yet. It could be. And also, what are the right interactions between agents that we actually want to be able to use, and how can we express them if we try to abstract from Yavorskaya's framework? So there's these 2 dimensions are the sticking points. That's kind of where we're at right now, and that's where I hope we're going to get to. Not today, but hopefully in the next few months. Oh, let me point out one last thing. I know you're so tired of me, but this is an explicit version of our zero knowledge axiom. If S is a transcript that witnesses for I that this is a zero knowledge proof of phi, one way to make this explicit would be, it's not the case that for any T, and this kind of touches on your point as well, and this is part of the additional degrees of freedom we have when we go more explicit, is we can start making these distinctions. This is one way of reading it. There is no proof artifact or no transcript that J could use to witness that that S was a proof for I of phi. That's one way of reading it. There's another way of reading it if we were to introduce some kind of conversion term in there, that listen, if S is an artifact of zero knowledge proof for agent I of phi, there's no method of converting it for agent J to use as a witness to agent I's having S as a proof of phi. So these are 2 very different ways that you can make the same zero-knowledge axiom explicit. Either there's nothing you could do at all, or there's nothing that you could do with the fodder that S already has. So some of these points that are, I think, like complicated and sometimes like they outrun my intuitions a little bit, they're gonna rapidly come up and bite us, and we're going to need to grapple with them because now we can start expressing these kinds of things. So the reason we're pursuing this is because we want to do it right, and it may crash and burn. If it crashes and burns, it'll crash and burn for the right reasons at least. I think that's my last slide. No. This is the point right here. We can't just have any arbitrary constant specification. We need to think about that, and there's a question of whether we can recursively say, this is the appropriate one. So, still open. Okay, that's it. No. Well, wait, you've got like time for questions now. Still there, okay. Thank you, by the way, for being patient with me. Sorry. I don't know, okay.
So, time for questions. Maria first, then Elia, and then Kat.
Thank you, Thomas. It's just a curiosity type of question. So I was wondering, what happens when you have multiple agents being part of either the verifying part or the prover part?
Okay, so Iki and I had many hours, tear-filled hours in front of the whiteboard, thinking about what do the subscripts look like? Is it box sub J, like J has a zero-knowledge proof, or do you need to like represent the identity of prover in that case? Does it need to be box sub IJ? I received an artifact, a transcript from J purporting to be a proof of phi. So we have suppressed the role of prover in this prover-verifier interaction in the syntax. And I think it works, but that is totally a way to go. That we're like trying to point out who in this interaction is the prover, who's the verifier. Like the role of prover has been suppressed, essentially. I'm sorry if I'm hitting your question correctly. Yeah, so we ultimately figured it would be more accurate, but that it didn't seem to be necessary to track the provenance of the transcript in the syntax itself. But it might end up, like, as I anticipate, we're going to have a lot of hair-pulling, tear-filled moments to come when we start making things explicit. Because like this slide shows, like, you can fake the funk when there's a little bit with boxes. You can kind of hand wave. But when you actually have to populate these things with artifacts, you can't equivocate anymore. So it might end up being this is just an utter failure. And by the way, what would have salvaged it is that we needed to track the provenance of the transcript as well. So it might come to pass that that is really important.
Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm not sure who was next. Alien.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about if your system is consistent with the idea that someone might have zero knowledge, that someone else has some piece of zero knowledge or other. Not they have zero knowledge of a specific proposition, simply that of some proposition he has zero knowledge.
Like if we had propositional quantifiers or something?
So I know you have zero knowledge of something.
Yeah.
Because the worry is that if you have monotonicity, then if I know that you have zero knowledge of something, then whatever it is, that entails the trigger truth. So I will know that by monotonicity, you have zero knowledge of the trigger truth that contradicts the strong zero knowledge axiom you have.
No, I could see this being like hashed out in a rule form or something, like, because we don't have propositional quantifiers, so it's in the language, it's not clear how to express, like, I's got zero knowledge of something.
Well, I mean, we can agree on a very long disjunction, and then I can say I know you have zero knowledge of that. I have zero knowledge at either you know the first disjunct or you know the second disjunct.
Right. Well, one way of probably doing that would be that I know that you have zero knowledge of a tautology. It's on a classical base. If you have knowledge of anything, you have knowledge. Because K is something, well, in the systems with K, that would work. So if we add K back in, knowledge of a tautology is going to be sufficient. I'd have to go and kind of run through what that looks like. But yeah, the antipodes, knowledge of tautologies and knowledge of contradictions are interesting kind of parts of this landscape. I'll have to think about this more, but I appreciate it. I think it's a very good insight. Thanks.
Who was next? Yeah.
This is so awesome and fun, and I am so inspired by so much of this.
Oh, thanks.
At some point, I'm going to bug you a bunch about the small j testimony in this. That's really interesting. But I wanted to ask you this line earlier on. You need to go back to it, but you said that you took it to be the case that the reason that portability fails is because factivity fails. And I wasn't sure that that was the case, because it seems like the reason that portability fails is because you have to trust the testifiers, not that it's not factive, because there's lots of stuff that if I trust you, then even though it's not factive, I can still get like a quite high degree of belief from you. But if I don't trust you, if I think you might be an adversary of me trying to convince me of something that I have no reason to want to believe, or that I want actually not to believe, then it seems like that is the problem.
Yeah, so we've already in a bunch of points talked about perils of abstracting into this meager language that we have. So you've done logic with somebody who's super technically savvy but not a logician before, right? So this is me working with Iki. Okay, well, Iki took my non-classical logic course, is aware modal logic and everything. We're sitting down to work on this, and we need to have a trust operator. We need to trust that I trust. It needs to have a quaternary relation, because I need to trust J with respect to testimony from K. Trust is a really important thing in here, and there's all right. So maybe what would have been better is in the more modest representation of these concepts that we can express in the language, factivity is linked to the failure of portability. In a broader sense, yes, trust is absolutely the case. But the trust also is linked to the failure of factivity as well. If I know that you can't possibly go wrong, in this very limited case, I have no reason not to trust you.
No, but I think even if I know that, if you had a proof, it would be perfect. It would absolutely be factive. Even if you can still lie to me, then I can't trust you. You said, right? It's just the, if I, go talk to the Oracle of Delphi and she's like, hey, it's gonna rain tomorrow. I'm like, cool, thanks. And then I come back to you and I'm like, hey, guess what? It's not gonna rain. No umbrella. Don't worry about it. Even though I had a perfect source, that doesn't determine whether you should trust me.
Yeah, and I hope at some point that we are able to make sort of modifications to this that really allow for, because this is an impoverished, this is not zero, this is not zero, this is not the zero knowledge book is 12,000 pages. It's just we're scratching the surface. But I'm trying to take what I think to be philosophically salient things that are challenging to the standard paradigms we have in epistemic logic. And I think contra-nominality shows that it goes against it. But yeah, I would love to be in a case where we could express trust, because when you trust, when it's not adversarial, because I guess maybe that's a way of bridging the train. It's not the possibility of failure of trust, of factivity, it's that you don't know that it's not an adversarial relationship. And that is, if you're doing this from a cryptographic perspective, the adversarial nature, that you can't rule that out, is everything. But yeah, you're totally right to point that out. It's unfortunately a side effect of not having all of the operators in the world, but we know sometimes not to do things one step at a time. But yeah, no, thank you. Awesome.
I think Adia had a second question.
Can squeeze in 1 minute.
I mean, we have time for
This is kind of counter to that. So she was saying you may want more operators. And my question is, have you considered that maybe some nesting of boxes doesn't make sense? Or are you worried about that? Or
I think it makes sense.
always?
I think it always
Do not-
makes
do not have to
sense.
restrict.
Like, I don't, right, so it makes sense to attempt to prove this. I'm not sure that the cases in which it could be successful, except like with an internal kind of thing. But the success internally, that I can prove to my own satisfaction that I have a proof, is largely related to the fact that I trust myself. Like the fact that this works when it's box I, it's totally linked to the fact that I am assuming that I am reliable for my own internal epistemic purposes.
I mean, zero knowledge is something you can apply to any sort of proposition, no matter how complex and how many operators there are inside. That's the intuition.
The way that we're looking at it.
Okay.
Again, like in the cryptography textbook, zero knowledge applies to decision problems that you can solve in P. That's gone by the wayside. Oh my God, that's another thing. Iki was like, no, but we need to have complexity operators that indicate the complexity of, so we need more modals. We need a P, we need an NP, we need, like, yeah. So, God, Iki's great. I'm so stoked that I stole the Iki from computer science. But yeah, like, to your actual question, it makes sense that, what am I trying to do in the Aladdin's cave? Like when I go and I try to prove to a reporter, and I'm like, well, look at our transcripts. I'm offering up like meta transcripts to them, attempting to do a proof in zero knowledge that I have zero knowledge. It's just, it's a very perilous task at that point. It can't be transferred. So I think it makes sense to nest. It doesn't make sense necessarily to expect that it would succeed. Does that answer? Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to the two ways of understanding ZKA. That's what. Oh, really?
Oh!
It's there.
But you said, don't say it. So I put it in for you.
Aren't you assuming that the only way to know that somebody knows something is by knowing what is the basis of their knowledge? That's because this is a kind of proved knowledge, so, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the point about testimony, because that means that you cannot transfer knowledge by any sort of testimony or any sort of communication or any sort of trusting between the agents. It's only the proof. The proof has to be fully responsible for all the epistemic status of any agent.
Yeah.
But that's kind of weird, right? Because again, why would that be still? How can that be again non-transferable if there is nothing subjective about the source of the knowledge?
How can say this one more time?
Okay. Yes. So the idea here is that the only way I can know that you know is because I know what your knowledge is based on, and I verify it, or I convert it to something that I can know myself.
This is very related to Maria's point of like what I call like tracking the provenance. What I had said is like tracking the provenance of where you got your zero knowledge proof.
Where means
Who?
axioms.
From
No,
whom?
but no, it's not whom.
Okay.
When you keep tracking, it's only the steps. You don't actually track.
But you're talking about transparency or something like that, right?
No.
About how the justification was built?
What
The
I
only
imagine.
way I can know that my only access to your epistemic status regarding any proposition is through knowing where you got, what were the steps you followed. But once I know that, it doesn't matter that she made them, because now I have access to all the steps, and still there is a way, and still you still think that even if I have all those steps, I still cannot access her knowledge, and that's kind of strange.
But that's transparency.
Well, what like maybe what would help if I just said what I anticipate this S looks like. What is this S? This S is like an XML packet where it says, listen, you sent this tokenless request to this address. this address returned this. And then you sent token Y to this address, and address sent this token back. And it's just this this tuple of interactions. You can extract out of that the source. You don't have from S access to what your prover, what their internal state was. All you have is the transcript of interactions between you. So you never have guaranteed access to knowing what they were thinking, or it's always based on some degree of trust or lack of trust, or that they've been able to satisfy you. But yeah, look, the difference is that if this is a proof in PA or something, your proof of PA is fully articulate. Everything you need to know about the proof it wears it on its face, right? I mean, it might point to lemmas and other textbooks or something, but it's self-contained, independent object. That's not what these S's look like.
What do they look like again?
They're XML records of interactions with a proving service, essentially. They're a tuple of interactions with a service that's proving it to you, agent I, the verifier. Yeah. So, but there is an incredible amount of context that's necessary to really grasp its content, but there's a gap, because what's the important, I think, epistemic state here is the verifiers. What degree of risk are they willing to take? At what point do they become convinced? How much would they have needed to become convinced?
Good.
But they're very different than PA proof objects. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going with Kat, then Brad, and that will be for the session.
This back and forth, actually with Maria's thoughts in there too, maybe it's not provenance, but evidential support relations that are actually what's kind of really important. You're getting the transcript, so you're trusting that the transcript is the real transcript, right? So you're trusting that you're getting the exact same evidence that the verifier has, except the thing you don't have is the evidential support relation. That is to say that this evidence actually genuinely provides support for the proposition that the verifier purports that it does. And that's the thing, the provenance actually doesn't matter. It's not where it's coming from, it's not what the steps are. It's, should I believe that these steps support this proposition? And that's the gap in the zero knowledge, because for the case where you don't need the zero knowledge, you can discern that in fact each of the steps does support, right? I don't know exactly what to do with that here, but I think this is one of the things that doesn't get discussed enough in epistemology writ large, is the relationship between evidence and evidential support relations. But it seems that's the missing piece. Why should I, the reporter, believe that this evidence you're giving me actually supports P?
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of when I was suggesting that the really salient stuff about the epistemic features of the agents in an interaction where I is the verifier and J is the prover, it's really in the verifier, because their expectations and what they anticipate will provide support for something or justification for something. Those are the salient, important ones. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question about conceptually about axiom 4. If I has zero knowledge of phi, then I has zero knowledge that I has zero knowledge of phi. Wasn't that it?
Yeah, I figured for everybody. Let's see, I can just put it up for everybody. 4.
So,
yeah.
What I was concerned with is, I assume that if you have zero knowledge of something, you don't have actual knowledge of that thing.
Yeah.
So that means that 4 precludes the possibility of coming to know that you have zero knowledge of something, and that seems wrong.
Say this
So
one more time.
So if you can't have genuine knowledge that you have zero knowledge of something, then it seems like it's but it seems like it's conceptually possible that you can know that you have zero knowledge of something, and that seems precluded by 4, because take someone who has zero knowledge of phi and also knows that they have zero knowledge that they have zero knowledge of phi. That's precluded by 4. Because
Okay, so zero knowledge. All right. I don't think zero knowledge does not lead to knowledge.
no, but
But I don't think it precludes knowledge.
It doesn't. So you can have zero knowledge of phi and knowledge of phi.
I think that seems reasonable to me. Yes, so there's something subtly different going on in this interaction and this interaction. It's also something that's probably only made possible by the fact that we are suppressing who the prover is in this case, right? Like, I am now essentially acting as my both verifier and prover in this setting. I'm rehearsing the transcripts, I'm examining them, and I say, yes, that did satisfy me.
I'm wondering, so this might be misguided, but I'm wondering about like a stronger relation to phi. So it's not that you have zero knowledge of it, but you're fully aware of the fact that you have zero knowledge of phi.
Yes, I just don't know that, and I would like to look at how, just in like a 2-player case, how zero knowledge I, zero knowledge J, knowledge I, knowledge, how that works out as well. But we don't have the really means to express it, and if zero knowledge in an informal sense precluded knowledge, then I would totally take your point, but I don't think they're inconsistent with one another. Yeah. No, but thank you. The relationship is not entirely clear.
The nesting.
Yeah. And that was a worry that we had about zero knowledge axiom for the first time, is that we were equivocating between zero knowledge and knowledge. And I think we've resolved that to our satisfaction. But yeah, like, we don't have the means really to express it yet, but it is something that is super worth doing, because I think where zero knowledge really, as an abstract epistemic notion, becomes interesting is when it starts interacting with other epistemic concepts. It's just that, again, it's a meager, modest language because we have to build things one step at a time, right?
Okay, then, I guess what's left is to thank Thomas again.
Yeah. Thank you very much.